He took her hand in his. A very good job. It put me through school and, along with the interest from my inheritance, gave me enough to start a clinic. He hesitated, and then shrugged. I never intended to be a salesman all my life, and the company hasn't been the same since it changed hands. Ethics have gone out the door and greed is in. They figure if it makes money, it must be a wise business choice. I don't like operating that way, or representing a company that does. I figure if you have to sacrifice your ethics to keep a job, it's time to look for another one. I always wanted to be a veterinarian, so I decided to fulfill that dream. I made arrangements to quit my job this fall and work my residency at a clinic in Houston. She smiled up at him and squeezed his hand. Good for you, but why the big secret? He shrugged again and looked uncomfortable. I guess I just like surprises. Kind of silly, when you get to thinking about it, I guess. She gazed up into those warm eyes. I think it's sweet. His neck darkened, but he continued to hold her hand. Now don't go mushy on me. She laughed softly. Katie has no idea how lucky she was to have you to look after her back then, does she? I worry about her sometimes. I know Bill will take good care of her, but Alex grimaced. She's not heavily endowed with common sense or ambition, but she does have attributes. Of course, Carmen answered instantly. Did he think she was trying to say Katie was stupid? I just thought. Well, you must have had a rough time trying to raise her. He laughed shortly. Yeah, my only child. She turned her hand over, so that her palm touched the warmth of his. It's not too late for you to start a family, you know. He dropped her hand as if it had suddenly become too hot to hold, and glanced at his watch. Well, I'd better get out of here before they kick me out. Warmth flooded up her neck and she avoided his eyes. I suppose so. She bit her lip and stared at the blanket. How could she have been so bold, so desperate, so fickle? Hadn't she been considering Josh as a partner less than 30 minutes ago? After Alex left, she stared at the empty doorway. Had Alex written off marriage completely? And why should it matter to her? After all, they came from two different worlds. She didn't want to live in Houston any more than he wanted to live on a goat farm. Not that he was interested anyway. Obviously he had reconsidered his intentions toward her, or had she misread them from the start? She shook her head and dropped back on the pillow. Why was she even considering a man who didn't want children? For the right man, she might give up the farm and go live in the city, but children? No, there could be no compromise on that subject. But then, many a man didn't want children until he had them. Maybe Alex was simply burned out on raising children after giving up so much for Katie, only to have her run away. If that were the case, his attitude would change quickly enough when he held his first baby. She woke early the next morning and dressed, making a trip to the office before Alex arrived. She had expected to find Alex had paid the hospital bill, but that wasn't the case. Instead, she discovered it was Josh. Why would Josh pay something so expensive? Was he trying to buy her back? No, that wasn't his style. Still, she felt guilty and confused. She had missed Josh, but it wasn't the gut-wrenching loneliness she felt when Alex left. Maybe that was because Josh was only a mile down the road. Why was she so infatuated with Alex? Was he merely a change in pace? Was it his money? No, the idea turned her stomach. Anyway, if money were the only issue, she should find Josh irresistible. Maybe it was because Alex was so attractive. Of course. Josh was as good looking, if not better looking in a rugged kind of way. Then what? She couldn't be in love with Alex. They hadn't known each other long enough. Yet she had an ever-growing feeling that Alex was the one. Until last night, she had been convinced that he was too sophisticated to be interested in farming. But now, she sighed. It was ridiculous. The only reason Alex was here right now was to help Katie run the farm, and maybe convince her to go back to Houston with him. Yet, according to Katie, she had told him she would never move back to Houston, that she intended to marry Bill. A brisk step in the hallway brought her attention sharply back to the present. Her heart did a flip-flop as Alex came through the door, dressed in a blue western shirt and denim jeans. He was so elegant in a suit and so masculine in western attire. Which was the real Alex? His dark eyes lit up when he saw her and he smiled warmly. I see you, ready to go. They were dispatching a wheelchair for you when I came in. Her heart was pounding for a man who didn't think of her as anything more than a little sister. I don't need a wheelchair, she grumbled. He chuckled. I told them they have to strap you down to get you into it. They weren't impressed. In fact, I think they were looking forward to it. He sat on the edge of the bed. It's hospital policy. Humor them. Otherwise, I'll have to carry you down to the car. She smiled reluctantly. In the interest of safety, she answered dryly, I think I'll take the wheelchair. This light banter was one of the things she had missed most about him, that and his confidence. Was it merely a facade, or did he always have a clear view of where he was headed and the confidence to get him there? Again she wondered why he had never married. He must have loved her deeply, that girl who had walked all over his heart. Could the footprints ever be removed? They talked all the way to the car and all the way home. Yet she couldn't remember anything of importance that they had discussed. It was simply idle conversation about everything from the weather to politics. He certainly was a good conversationalist. Carmen had barely settled in at home before Lori drove up and whisked Alex away. Reminding herself that Alex had made no commitment, she still couldn't put the picture of him opening the car door for Lori out of her mind. Lori was so tall and sophisticated. The kind of woman he would want to marry. She tried to feel happy for them, but all she could feel was animosity toward Lori. It wasn't as if Lori would know how she felt. Everyone still thought she was going to marry Josh. Sitting on the couch feeling sorry for herself wasn't accomplishing anything. What she needed was something to get her mind off Alex and Lori. Some work in the barn would be nice. Alex and Lori had been gone over 2 hours when Josh drove into the yard. Carmen was scooping hay out of one of the kidding stalls when he found her at the barn. He scowled from the doorway. I thought Alex was going to help you girls. You shouldn't be out here working like that. You going to get sick again. She smiled up at him. I am fine, and Alex doesn't even know I am out here. What about Katie? She's in the house sewing. I snuck out, so don't go blaming anyone else. He leaned against the barn door jamb and frowned at her. You crazy, you know that. Tires crunched on gravel and he glanced out the door. It was Lori and Alex. Alex got out of the car and leaned down to say something to Lori. Then he shut the door and glanced at Josh's truck and the barn. He headed for the house as Lori turned the car around. "What are they up to?" Josh asked. Carmen shrugged. "I don't know. It's none of my business. Oh, and that reminds me. I owe you some money." He shifted his attention to her. "How's that?" "The hospital bill. Did you think I would find out? Why did you pay it?" He shrugged. "You had enough to worry about. Anyway, I wanted to do something." She rolled her eyes. "You were doing something. You were doing my chores." He shrugged again. "It wasn't enough. I felt bad about. I just wanted to help." "You felt bad? How do you think I would have felt if I couldn't pay you back? I never intended for you to pay me back. Anyway," he smiled wryly, "when we get married it will be my bill." She stabbed the pitchfork into the dirt floor. "Now there's a good reason to get married," she said sourly. He crammed his hands into his pockets and stared down at her. "We have a lot more reasons than that, don't we? We've been dating since high school. Has there ever been anyone else you considered marrying?" He was watching her intently. He wanted to know where she stood with Alex. Actually, until she met Alex, even she had assumed that Josh would eventually be her husband, though she wasn't in any big hurry. But was it Alex who had come between them, or did he simply show up at a critical time? Hadn't she been drifting from Josh for the last few months, before she knew anything about Alex? And what did it matter? Alex was interested in Lori, so he was out of the picture anyway. Still, marrying Josh, while another man was so capable of lighting her fire, didn't seem fair, especially when Josh couldn't it Alex isn't it. When she glanced up questioningly, he shook his head. "I knew it when he walked into the hospital room last night. Your face never lit up that way for me. What he got that I don't have?" She gnawed on her lower lip and finally met his gaze. "I have no idea. Maybe nothing, but I need the time to be sure." She might as well have punched him in the stomach. He winced visibly. "Well, that's right." It was her turn to flinch at the sting of his words. "I am sorry, Josh. But when I get married, I intend to take my vows seriously. I don't want any unfinished business cropping up later." In 2 long strides he was standing before her, gathering her into his arms and kissing her. "I love you, Carmen. I always have. That ought to be worth something. Haven, I always been there for you." It was true. He was everything a woman could ask for. And yet, where was the excitement? She stretched as far as she could and laced her fingers behind his neck, pulling his mouth down to hers again. With all her heart, she tried to create the excitement she had felt when Alex kissed her. It had to be there, somewhere. But all she managed to do was arouse Josh. He lifted her by the waist and crushed her body against his, bruising her lips passionately. Her feet literally inches from the floor, she could do nothing but endure his onslaught. Finally he released her, and when her feet touched the floor again, she took a deep breath. Apparently he mistook her breathless state as an indication of passion. He smiled down at her smugly. "Think about that for a while. She would, unfortunately. He swung on one heel and left the barn, striding to his truck. Without looking back, he hopped into his truck and drove away. In that moment, she knew they would never be man and wife. Her only hope was to retain his friendship. The sadness she felt as his truck disappeared down the road was born of fear. Fear that she was also losing the only brother she had ever known. Well, wasn't that a touching scene? The voice was caustic. She caught her breath, squinting into the shadows. Alex. It sounded like his voice, but she had never heard that tone. He moved out of the shadows. No wonder he keeps hanging around. You must be proud. Keeping both of us on the string like that. It was so unfair, so true. And what right did he have to talk? He, spent the last few hours with Lori. Tears of anger and shame burned her eyes as she swung away from him. Shut up. The words were strangled from her throat by a sob. She couldn't let him see her cry. She darted for the door. Alex grabbed her arm as she passed, whirling her to face him. Whoa, there. What's this? Let me go. She jerked her arm, but his grip was strong. She turned her face away from him so he wouldn't see the tears coursing down her cheeks. He pulled her close. Don't confuse love with pity, Carmen. I did that once, and I nearly made the mistake of my life. Don't let him force you into a decision you not ready to make. She jerked her head around and stared up at him. Pity? Josh. Why would I pity him? He gazed down at her for a moment. Because he loves a woman who can return his love. I love him. His dark gaze was intense. Do you? Then how do you explain this? He pulled her into his arms and claimed her lips. It was all wrong, and all she felt was anger. She jerked away from him and swung a hand at his face. He grabbed her hand. All right, so now you, angry. But tell me you didn't feel anything the last time we kissed. Tell me you don't feel anything for me at all, and I'll leave, and never come back. She stared at him mutely. She couldn't tell him. Not only because it would be a lie, but also because she didn't want him to leave and never come back. He smiled wryly. That's what I thought. So why are you going to marry him? Because you can let him down. She snatched her hand from his grip. What do you care? He gazed down at her for a moment, his eyes dark with emotion. Because I care about your happiness. I thought we were friends. Only friends? She met his gaze and knew her lip was quivering. She swallowed down a lump in her throat and tore her gaze from his. We are. She turned toward the door. I came in here to tell you something. His voice followed her, and when she stopped, he continued. After this last incident, Bill insisted that Katie get a phone. I know it's a major expense. So I made arrangements today. Just send me the bill and I'll take care of it. She swung around and faced him. You took care of it? What is this, a contest between you guys? How much testosterone does it take to manage a farm? I am sick and tired of you guys butting into my financial affairs. If Bill wants that's enough, Carmen. His voice was controlled. Bill is right. If it had been Katie who was sick, would you have been able to get her into the truck and to the hospital? She stared up at him. Why hadn't she thought of that before? Probably because she wasn't in a financial situation to do anything about it anyway. She turned away from him so that he couldn't see she was ready to cry again. What was it with the tears? Lately, anyway. I suppose you, rewrite, she muttered as she headed for the door. Carmen. He reached for her arm, but she evaded his grasp and continued toward the door. Not now, she couldn't let him see her cry, couldn't let him feel pity for her. But he called after her. It isn't violating any moral issue for you, is it? She stopped, and glanced over her shoulder. Moral issue? A telephone. He took a step toward her. I know you don't have a TV. I thought. I don't have anything against a telephone. She kept her back to him. The diversion was helping her get her emotions under control. Only the $2,000 it will take to put the lines down this way, and cell phone reception is unreliable. I can imagine what would make you think such a thing. A pause, then, you have such old-fashioned ideas sometimes. She nodded. So I've been told. A product of being an only child of aging parents. No doubt. She wiped the tears from her cheek. I don't ask people to adhere to my values, but I do ask that they respect my right to exercise my own. If you thought it might offend me, why did you ask me first? He was silent and she glanced around to gauge his response. His neck was red and, for the first time since she had met him, he didn't have a quick answer. Finally he shrugged. I am not used to asking permission. I guess I was out of line, but he shrugged again. I am sorry. She gazed up at him with newfound admiration. I respect a man who is decisive and follows through, as long as he confines it to his own household. His brows shot up. Coming from a liberated woman like you, that sounds a little strange. Couldn't you be tried by the women's movement for treason? There was a twinkle in his eye that coaxed a smile to her lips. Make no mistake. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself, but if you think I want to spend the rest of my life like this, you don't know me at all. I have no intention of marrying a man for support, financial or any other. But when I do marry, he's going to be man enough to wear the pants, and he will. He eyed her skeptically. I've heard a few women claim they believed that, but it's a little hard to believe, in this day. A woman turning her life over to a man is. I didn't say anything about turning my life over to a man, she interrupted sternly. A marriage is a partnership, not a dictatorship. Still, what business could survive without a person with final authority on decisions? And how could that person make wise decisions without the input from the accounting department, the lawyer, and sales? Someone has to be head of the household, final authority. I am old-fashioned enough to believe it should be the man, as long as he's the most qualified. And the man I marry will have to qualify. He gazed down at her. A tall order to fill. She shrugged. Not necessarily. I've met 3 men in my life that qualify on those grounds, and I don't get around that much. There are a lot of good men out there. 3. His eyes began to twinkle again. I bet one was your father, or you wouldn't feel this way. Another would be Josh, because you are still considering him. Who's the third? Warmth crawled up her neck and she smiled up at him wryly. We kind of strayed from the subject, didn't we? As I recall, I was telling you guys to keep your own stables clean. He was silent a moment, and his gaze became guarded. Meaning, if I can, take care of my own stable, I shouldn't be meddling in yours. He would take it that way. Was he referring to his failed romance? She shook her head. No, meaning you should mind your own business, meaning this isn't your stable. He quirked a brow, and the dark eyes twinkled with the very devil. Not yet. She stared up at him. He was teasing, of course. He found this entire conversation amusing. And what was worse, now he thought she was setting a trap for him. Why couldn't she learn to keep her big mouth shut? When his humor failed to bring a smile to her lips, he crammed his hands into his pockets and stared at the ground. I suppose a guy should be careful whose filly he's trying to shoo into his stable. Especially when she's still wearing another man's halter. He glanced up and smiled at her. Of course, she might be skittish if she didn't know how secure the structure was. A man would have to be careful not to move too fast. She stared at him. Was he trying to say he was interested in marriage? Alex? No. He said he wanted her, but in truth, he was still involved with the past. She met his gaze. Any filly would be skittish about going into a stable where the ghost of another lingered. The smile faded from his lips and the dark eyes veiled over again. Was he angry? Hurt? It was true, though. Alex wasn't over his last relationship yet. His silence was all the proof she needed. He was the third man, the only man for her, because he could do something that neither her father nor Josh could. He could make her enjoy being second mate. And with that thought she was certain she loved him. Was there a chance for them, if she was willing to wait? Chapter 8. Sunday night Alex left again, but this time with a promise to come back for Easter. This time they did kiss goodbye, and Carmen was sure that Lori was the reason. Alex and Lori had been together most of the day. Apparently their conversation in the barn had scared him off. If he thought Lori was less complicated, he was in for another shock. But then, he wasn't looking for a permanent relationship, and Lori wouldn't be nudging him to get married. Lori would be content with things the way they were. Time was galloping by and now she was further from her goal than ever before Alex came on the scene. Marriage was only a yes down the road. Now she couldn't marry Josh, and couldn't bring herself to break the news to him. Why burn that bridge when she might get desperate enough to cross it? Maybe her feelings for Alex were nothing more than temporary infatuation. Alex might have given up on her, but Josh had doubled his efforts. He was around nearly every day now, and when he didn't show up, he called on the phone. He was actually making an effort to please her as well. He even taken her dancing once, and yesterday he picked her a mess of greens. He wouldn't be caught dead with a bouquet of wildflowers, and there was no way he was going to waste money on flowers that would wither and die within a week. It wasn't the money he objected to so much as the irrational logic. She tried to help him drive Alex from her mind, but at times it seemed an impossible chore. The man in her dreams often started out as Josh, but always ended up being Alex. Yet even in her dreams, Alex was the only one who could excite her. Maybe that was why the days before his arrival were so long. Easter weekend finally drew near. Good Friday was exactly that, warm and sunny with only a few marshmallow clouds drifting overhead. Katie was busy sewing something for her hope chest, so Carmen grabbed her cane pole and some liver from the refrigerator, and strolled down to the pond. Kicking off her shoes, She rolled up her pants legs and settled in for a good time. She baited the hook and threw it in the pond, watching as tiny waves rippled out from the bobber and gently lapped at the grassy shore. Dropping to the ground, she plucked a piece of grass and tucked it between her lips as she leaned back against the old apple tree. Above her, bees buzzed around the aromatic apple blossoms. Somewhere in the distance a meadowlark began its melodic whistle, and a hen sang industriously up by the house. From the lip of the pond, the panoramic scene was breathtaking. The hills were a profusion of snowy dogwood and pink plum and cherry blossoms. Wild phlox filled the air with a heavenly scent that rivaled lilacs. Nature was at her peak, blending the wild blooms with various shades of green. She closed her eyes and dozed in the warm sun. It was a heavenly day. A light wind whispered across the grass and a cloud drifted over, blocking the sun from her face. She opened her eyes and blinked at the form above her. Alex. She snatched the piece of grass from her mouth and scrambled to her feet, feeling the blood burning her neck and cheeks. He looked delicious in that dark suit. Alex laughed. Oh, if I only had a camera. She unrolled her pants legs and slipped into her shoes, giving him a chagrined smile. I didn't think you were coming in until this afternoon. He brushed some grass from her back. I didn't have any classes today and I decided to take off work. I was lucky enough to get an early flight. He reached down and grabbed her cane pole from the ground. What's this? At that moment, the bobber plunged under the surface of the water. Alex jerked the pole, setting the hook, and then glanced at her as the fish fought for freedom. Now what? There's no reel. Pull back on the line, like this. She grabbed the line and pulled it toward them. She stepped back and watched as he excitedly hauled the little mud cat to the shore and released it. He stooped to rinse his hands in the pond and smiled up at her. You really know how to live, you know that, Heidi. He stood and shook the water from his hands. This brings back childhood memories. He glanced around. Only the country wasn't near as pretty. His gaze fell on her and his smile broadened, including the dimple. Beauty everywhere I look, and to think I only have 3 days to enjoy it. He reached for her and she dodged playfully. Come on. I'll show you the swimming hole. She darted around the apple tree and half skipped, half ran down the hill toward the creek. At the path she slowed, and he caught up with her, following her to the edge of the creek. A huge white sycamore skeleton sprawled on the gravel beach, its bark long gone. She kicked a pile of leaves from the branches where the flood waters had deposited it a few weeks ago. Climbing up the trunk, she found a smooth spot and sat down. Alex leaned against the trunk and grinned up at her. Like a little lynx. Do you do this often? She wrinkled her nose. You mean climb trees? And run through the fields like a little filly? She grinned. Make up your mind. Am I a horse or a cat? He grabbed her leg and with a quick jerk, dislodged her from the tree, right into his waiting arms. She squealed and he lowered her feet to the ground, gently pulling her close. I missed you, he whispered against her lips and then proceeded to show her how much. His lips were as warm as the hands that gripped her waist. For a moment she returned his kiss passionately, her arms encircling his neck and drawing him closer. I missed you too, she whispered breathlessly. They shouldn't be alone out here in the woods, necking like this. She should do something. She drew back and met his hungry gaze. It was a mistake. In an instant he pulled her back into his arms and reclaimed her lips. She did nothing to stop him, anyway. It was as if they were one person, clinging to each other, neither wanting to be the first to end the embrace. But it had already gone too far and his fingers were sliding down her neck, into her blouse. She pushed away from him, gasping for air. Alex, Don, do that. He reached for her again, his voice husky with emotion. I want you, Carmen. His words were like a dash of cold water. He wanted her, like he wanted her in the barn that day. He wanted her and he was going to have her someday. He wasn't talking about marriage. He was talking about sex. How could she have been so naive? And he expected her to come to him all sweet and willing. Tears blurred her vision as she slapped at his hand. That's all you ever wanted, wasn't it? A tumble in the hay with the farmer's daughter. He stared at her. Of all the... Do you actually think I traveled 600 miles? Just for a tumble in the hay with you? Do you think I am that desperate, or are you implying your reputation is that good? She blinked back a tear, but it escaped and slid down her cheek. That did sound a little vain. I don't have a reputation, she responded archly. He grimaced. Yes you do, and I might be the only man who could ruin it. She frowned up at him. Now who's being vain? His lips twisted into a lopsided smile. I am being honest, and you know it? Yes, she knew it, but this was one time she wasn't going to spill her guts. She rolled her eyes and stepped around him. It was just a kiss, Alex. Don, let your head swell up that way. It's unsightly. He silently followed her up the trail and then fell in beside her as they crossed the field. He gazed down at her reflectively. Just a kiss. His expression was pensive. Hiding her desire for him seemed a wise thing to do a few minutes ago, but maybe he thought she kissed every man like that. In truth, she had never kissed any man like that, and it troubled her that he might think she was easy. She stared up at him, struggling over her next move. Slowly a twinkle started in his eyes and a smile plucked at the corners of his mouth. He knew. Warmth flooded up her neck and she smiled. Katie is going to be worried. I've been gone a long time. He chuckled. Bill picked Katie up a half hour ago. Her heart lurched. They were alone? She wiped sweaty palms on her jeans and swallowed a lump in her throat. How could Katie run off like that? Alex cleared his throat. I thought we might go out for lunch and do some sight seeing. That would be nice, she answered quickly. This time the car he rented was a little white four-door car. It was simple and comfortable. Lunch was at a rustic little seafood place in Rogers called Catfish John's. And afterward she directed him to the War Eagle Mill. The narrow black highway ribboned smoothly downhill under a canopy of trees. Soon a green river winked at them playfully between rocks and bushes, and roared impressively as they entered the clearing at the mill site. 3 stories tall, the old mill stood picturesquely at the edge of the river. An old metal one-lane bridge at one side beckoned travelers to visit the lush pastures on the other side. They spent the next 15 minutes exploring the inside of the mill, and then they went out to the bridge. Alex took her hand as they started up the wooden ramp, and laced his fingers through hers. She glanced up at him and he pressed his warm palm against hers. Somehow he made it seem so intimate. He gazed down at her somberly. What was going on behind those dark eyes? They found a place on the side of the bridge and stared down at the water as it roared over the spillway. A car crossed the bridge behind them, leaving a wake of squeaking and groaning metal and wood. Alex slipped a protective arm around her waist and gazed at the mill. Fascinating. She nodded and pointed at the old cypress water wheel. See? The water goes under the wheel to turn it. It's the only working one like it in the United States. He smiled. You have such an inquisitive mind, crammed full of unusual facts. That's one of the things I love about you. She stared at him, but his attention was on the mill again. Love. Surely he didn't mean love in the romantic sense. He must have meant love in a family way, like he loved his sister. On the other hand, that was no sisterly kiss. Maybe it meant nothing to him. She stared at the churning water. Why was everything so complicated? Alex grabbed her hand again. We better get back, Heidi. It's almost milking time. Again. She nodded absently. It was always milking time anymore, or time to feed the kids. Was that part of her problem? Was she too involved with the farm? Alex took her home, changed into his Western garb, and helped her with the chores. Afterward, she was writing some information down in her dairy journal when Alex wandered by. What's that? He asked. She closed the book. I keep records on each goat and how many pounds of milk she gives daily, when she reached peak production and how long she lactated. It's for breeding and culling purposes. Sounds interesting, may I look at it? She handed him the book and he followed her into the barn, flipping through the pages. She paused and gazed out the barn door at the scenic view. Alex paused at the hay pile and sat down, cross-legged, while he examined a chart. This is darn good. Thanks, she said, and dropped to the hay beside him. It's been a lot of work, but it's all beginning to pay off now. By the end of the summer I'll have enough profit to roof the house. She stretched out on her stomach and absently poked a piece of straw into her mouth. Propping her chin up with her hands, she stared out at the hills. Maybe some day she would have enough to start her horse ranch. Alex tossed the book aside and stretched out beside her, following her gaze through the door. It sure is beautiful country. She nodded. I can imagine living anywhere else. She glanced up at him. I wanted to have a horse ranch. Did I ever tell you that? He was resting on one elbow, watching her in a disturbing way. Katie said something about it once. She turned and looked back out the door. She thinks I'll never do it on my own. She sighed. Maybe she's right. I am always cutting off more than I can chew. He rubbed her back gently. You'll make it? Don't lose faith in yourself. She smiled up at him. You know, you're the first person to tell me that. It feels good. He frowned. That's terrible. Everybody should have someone to share their dreams with. His fingers worked at the tenseness along her back. You know, he spoke slowly. I always wanted a ranch too. I wanted to put native wildlife on it. You know, like buffalo, pronghorn, and Dall sheep, wildlife native to the United States. That's what got me started saving money. He sighed. I almost forgot about it until you started talking about the horse ranch. She stared out the door. I think it's a wonderful dream. It sounds like a lot of fun. And expensive. He laughed shortly. Yeah, I got sidetracked, though. Then it didn't matter much. His fingers were gently massaging the muscles on either side of her backbone. Warm and relaxing. She closed her eyes. The barn smelled of fresh hay, oats and molasses. So peaceful this time of year, she said sleepily. I feel fat and lazy. He chuckled softly. Well, you, not, either one. His fingers slipped under her shirt, warmly working at the muscles in her back. I got an idea. She stiffened, resisting an urge to tell him to remove his hand. After all, it would have been perfectly acceptable if she were in a swimsuit and he had been applying sun lotion. They were fully dressed and he was merely rubbing her back. Besides, it felt delightful. What? Why Don, I bring Ed up here and stable him. I've been spending all my free time up here anyway, and that way you could give him some exercise when I am not here. I pay you. His fingers were working up her back, relaxing every muscle. She sighed deeply. I'd be glad to keep him here, but I don't want any money. Nonsense. I pay to board him now. His hand slipped to her side, gently exploring upward until it reached her breast. Her heart pounded and she rolled over on her back, dislodging his hand. He smiled down at her. Besides, I've been neglecting him lately. Another filly has caught my eye. She propped up on one elbow and met his gaze. Has she? How many fillies do you have now? The smile faded from his lips. Don, go there. He traced her jaw with a finger and his gaze became tender. So beautiful. She stared at him. You were thinking of her. He frowned. Her. She made a face. The girl who Jill left you. His gaze sharpened. She has a name, you know. What? He hesitated and then ground out. Tessa. Carmen stared at him. So that was why he acted that way when she told him what? She named her goat. Did he think she had named the goat after his girlfriend? She dropped back on the hay and wrinkled her nose at him. I always hated that name. The dark gaze softened and a smile played at the corners of his mouth. He clamped one hand around her waist and slid her closer, leaning over her as he spoke. That filly left the stable long time ago. Stop leaving grain out for her. She saw it coming too late, and he had her pinned to the floor on her back before she could squirm away. Her heart pounded as he moved over her and claimed her lips. She jerked her head to the side. Don, Alex, she panted. As he slid away, his belt buckle gouged into her stomach and she cried out in pain. Hey! What's going on here? Josh strode across the barn, his hands balled into fists, gray eyes smoldering like hot coals. Alex was on his feet instantly, watching Josh intently. Alex reached one hand down to help Carmen to her feet. Are you all right? He asked without looking at her. Yes. He stepped away from her, facing off with Josh. It isn't what it looks like. Josh smiled without humor. Now that's a familiar line. Seems like I heard it just this morning, from your lips. He moved toward Alex. I think it's about time to let you know. Who's? Carmen lunged at Josh, grabbing his arm and jerking on it. No, Josh. Don, Josh glanced down at her coldly and flexed his arm. Get out of the way. She fell to the floor and Alex glanced at her, allowing his attention to stray from Josh. For a second, Josh swung at Alex, grazing his head with a fist as Alex ducked. Carmen was on her feet again, and jumped between them. Stop it. You're not going to fight in my barn. This time Alex gently pushed her aside. Get back, Carmen, before you get hurt. She staggered back, but she wasn't about to let them fight over her. She stepped in between them again, distracting Alex to the point that Josh came close to hitting him. Alex pushed her away again. Then get back before you get me hurt. But before she could get out of the way, Josh bounced a blow off her shoulder. Wincing, she fell to the floor, turning pleading eyes on Josh. He lowered his fists and shook his head. It looks like Carmen is the only one getting anything out of this. He eyed Alex disdainfully. I don't know what it is about you that inspires women to defend you, but I am getting tired of talking to you about it. Alex kneeled beside Carmen and felt her shoulder. Does it hurt badly? She shook her head. He barely hit me. Alex glanced up at Josh coolly. I told you before. There's nothing going on between Lori and me. Josh snorted. Sure, like nothing was going on here. Alex gave him a level look. What goes on between Carmen and me is none of your business. It is if you hurt her. Alex scowled at him. Touching, but you think your concern is a little belated. Josh shook a finger at Alex. Listen, you little strutting banty. Maybe the women are impressed by you, but I am not. If you want Carmen, you better make your intentions honorable. If you toy with her and then run off, I am going to be on you like ugly on a bear. Alex stood, eyeing him coldly. I am getting tired of your threats and insinuations. If you trying to pick a fight, have after it. I am not running, and I don't need any woman to protect me. Carmen stared from one of them to the other, unable to believe her ears and eyes. What had Josh caught Alex and Lori doing? And why was Josh worried about what might be happening between Alex and Lori, anyway? Josh was making fight sounds. But if he had wanted to fight Alex, nothing she could have done would have stopped him. So why was he holding back? Two things came to mind. He admired Alex for his courage, and he thought Alex might be telling the truth. She struggled to rise and Alex helped her to her feet. She turned to Josh. Alex is a guest here, and I appreciate it if you keep that in mind the next time you show up. Josh wiped his forehead with a sleeve and gazed down at her. I didn't mean to hit you. She nodded, rubbing her shoulder. I know. He shook his head and left the barn. She stood beside Alex and listened to the truck door slam and the engine race when Josh started it. After Josh left the farm, she stared at the empty doorway. Well, that bridge was burned to a crisp. Chapter 9. Nothing more was said about the incident at the barn. Apparently Alex didn't want to talk about his relationship with Lori. In fact, it wasn't any of her business. After all, she had no claim on Alex. So when Lori picked him up again Easter Sunday morning, Carmen said nothing, except a prayer that Josh wouldn't catch him. If Alex was interested in Lori, Josh had no right to insist he make an honest woman of Carmen. That was another thing that irked her. Apparently Josh thought they were having an affair. Of course, it did look suspicious, and if she had come across Lori and Alex doing the same thing, she caught her breath. But it wasn't innocent. They were doing exactly what Josh had thought. Would it have looked any better if he had come in a few minutes earlier when Alex had his hand under her shirt? And hadn't she been a willing participant? Alex had forced himself on her, taken advantage of her. The only thing Josh didn't know was that Alex had stopped when she protested. Unwittingly, she had set Alex up for a fall. And yet his only attempt at defense had been to tell Josh that things weren't as they appeared. He wasn't defending himself, though. He was defending her honor. She was willing to bet the farm on it. Still, if Alex had been trying to get somewhere with her, why wouldn't he have tried with Lori? And hadn't he told Josh that it wasn't what it looked like, when it was exactly what it looked like? Should she fight for him, or was she better off without him? Alex was back by lunch and unusually quiet when they sat down to eat. No doubt he was thinking about Lori. Katie glanced at him questioningly a few times, but he gave his attention to his food. Finally Katie could bear the silence no longer. I have an announcement to make. She had their undivided attention. Bill and I are getting married, next weekend. Alex lifted one brow. Dawn, you think that's a little sudden? She scowled at him. We've been dating for over a year. Alex smiled. I meant the wedding date. It doesn't give me much time for preparations. She shrugged. We don't want a big wedding, and we already made the arrangements. She gnawed on her lower lip and shifted in her chair. We did want you to pay for our wedding. He lifted his tea glass and examined the amber liquid. I don't mind, you know. I put the past behind me. His gaze shifted meaningfully to Carmen. Katie did miss the exchange. Are you two having an affair? She asked tersely. Katie. Carmen gasped. Alex shook his head. No, Katie. I can even get on her shopping list. Carmen and Katie stared at him. Did he want on her list? Was this fling with Lori a ploy? One thing was sure, her list only contained one name, and he was on it. He seemed to be waiting for a response, so she shrugged. You better be careful making that kind of remark. Some love-struck girl is likely to take you up on it. He was watching her intently. That wasn't the response he wanted. I was on one of those lists once, he said in a monotone. I even got to the top. The trouble was, she forgot to scratch off the other name. Carmen could feel her face getting hot. Was he telling her to scratch Josh's name off her list? Didn't he know it had already been erased? She shrugged again. I thought you had put that in the past. His smile was sour. The affair, not the experience. Completely forgetting about the past is tossing away a valuable lesson. Now Alex, Katie began in a scolding tone, you can keep throwing your past in Carmen's face. All women aren't alike, you know, and he pointed his fork at her plate. Eat your lunch. Katie glanced at Carmen for support, but Carmen continued to stare at her plate. She wasn't about to say anything. Katie picked at her food. I heard she has a number 14 record. Alex attacked his food as if it were to blame for the havoc he had created at the table. Then I guess she married the right man, he commented casually. Carmen pushed the beans around on her plate a little more and wished she were anywhere but here. Obviously Alex wasn't ready for marriage because he was still involved with a woman who didn't love him. Her stomach was churning and her eyes burned with unshed tears. The kitchen clock ticked off 30 seconds before she put down her fork and pushed away from the table. I think I forgot to turn the water off when I filled the trough. From the corner of her eye she saw Katie give Alex a poisonous look, but Carmen walked out without looking in his direction. He made it plain enough how he felt. Once she was outside she viciously kicked at a stone. Why couldn't things work out? Even one time? And why did she always have to make such a fool of herself? No wonder he wasn't interested, not in marriage, anyway. Was that what he was trying to Tell her? If she were willing to take that tumble in the hay, he'd hang around a while longer. She kicked the stone again, sending it flying across the yard. The screen door squealed and slammed, and then Alex spoke. I thought you were going to check the water. Aaron, you headed in the wrong direction. She froze with her back to him. If you came out here to rub it in, you can go back in the house. I got your point. I am out of your hair, that's what you wanted, isn't it? Boots crunched on gravel behind her. I came out here to apologize for airing my dirty laundry on your kitchen table. Apology accepted. She kept her back to him. And I haven't shown up on your doorstep so often because I want you out of my hair. I know. You came up to see Katie. I am handy, that's all. He laughed shortly. Katie couldn't care less whether she sees me or not. She turned and stared up at him. Sure she does. And you care? He nodded and grimaced. That I do. But Katie isn't the one responsible for my visits. Her heart skipped a beat. No, the goats brought you the first time. He quirked a brow. Is that a fact? She stared at him. I thought you said. But he hadn't said anything. It was Katie who had said he was coming up to watch the goats kid. And it had been Katie who sent him that picture, to lure him up here. Alex smiled. I was intrigued by the girl Katie kept telling me about. When she sent me the picture, I had to come see for myself. You look so innocent and sweet. Warmth returned to her face. Was that all he saw in the picture? I didn't know. I know, he interrupted, and it made you that much more irresistible. But you keep pushing me away. Dawn, you know by now that I am in love with you. Her heart was pounding. Finally. But why didn't you say something earlier? It would have made things easier. His brows arched. I thought 3 days was being a pretty bold. Anyway, I was causing enough trouble between you and Josh as it was, and I wasn't sure where you stood with him. He touched her cheek. I am still not sure. She put her hand over his. Do you honestly think there could be anything between Josh and me after that scene in the barn yesterday? He gazed down at her somberly. I could tell him it was my fault, that I was forcing myself on you. He believe me. She shook her head. He nail your hide to the wall. He stiffened. He might try. She laughed. Somehow I get the idea he be taking on more than he could handle. She stepped closer to him. But I wouldn't want to take a chance on losing you. He smiled down at her, the dark eyes beginning to twinkle. Why not? She wrinkled her nose. As if you didn't know. I think you knew before I did. Because I love you. He drew her close in an embrace. That's what I've been waiting to hear. For a moment she laid her head on his chest, enjoying the smell of him and the feel of his hands on her back. Carmen, his voice was soft and husky. She lifted her head and gazed into those delicious dark chocolate eyes. His hand slid up her back in a slow caress that made her heart beat wildly. Warmth flooded her entire body so quickly that it was almost painful. Her breath came quickly as she leaned back into his hands. Never had she felt such an intense and thoroughly delightful emotion. Was this love? When his lips found hers, the world ceased to exist around them. Her hands operated on their own as they pushed against the inside of his shirt collar and snaked up to his neck. Pressing against him, she forced his lips down on hers. The magical moment was long, but not long enough. Alex was the one who finally broke the embrace and spell. Let's go to my room, he said in an emotion-packed voice that was barely above a whisper. His room? What were they doing? What was she thinking of, arousing him that way? Not now, she said, disentangling herself from his searching hands. I am sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I was just so aroused would have been the ideal word. But certainly wouldn't have defused him. Stuffing trembling hands into her pockets, she took a step back from him. Inexperienced, she finally supplied. His chuckle was soft. I am looking forward to experienced. For the next half hour they walked together and talked about her plans for a horse ranch. In the few hours remaining before his departure, her head was so far in the clouds that she didn't even notice he said nothing about marriage. It wasn't until after he left and Katie jokingly asked if they had set a date, that she remembered. Even Katie looked apprehensive at her hesitation. Maybe she didn't want her wedding day overshadowed by theirs. Carmen shrugged. There hasn't been any talk of marriage between Alex and me. Katie looked relieved, but Carmen's stomach took an uncomfortable lurch. Surely Alex was considering marriage now. They had simply overlooked the issue in their excitement. Chapter 10. Bill made arrangements to move in with Katie after they were married. There was plenty of room in the old house and Katie would continue helping with the chores until they found a place to live. Alex called on Thursday to see if Carmen still wanted to keep Ed. She agreed and he made arrangements to drive up Friday. They were so busy with wedding arrangements that Carmen couldn't afford time to miss him, but somehow she managed to do it anyway. Late Friday evening she was returning from the barn when he drove into the yard in a white Dodge Ram pickup. It was a late model 4X4 with an extended cab, exactly like the one in Rogers that she had been drooling over the last 3 months. Behind the truck was a one-horse trailer, old, but in good condition. She got a glimpse of the horse in the trailer. It was an Appaloosa, her favorite breed. And to think she once thought she and Alex had nothing in common. He was climbing out of the cab as she came around the front of the truck. He grinned and reached for her, drawing her close in an embrace. His kiss was ardent and she returned it with equal passion. When they finally drew apart, they were both breathless. I didn't know you were a pickup man, she teased. He grinned and slipped an arm around her waist as they turned toward the trailer. She put an arm around his waist and together they strolled back to take a look at Ed. Carmen stepped back as he unloaded the horse and then put her hand out to it. She moved too quickly and the stallion snorted. Easy boy, Alex said gently. You're going to have to get it into your head to like her. You're expendable. Carmen punched his arm playfully. Alex. You're terrible. He chuckled and handed her the reins. Here. Hold him a minute while I park the trailer and unhitch it. Where do you want me to put it? Over there by the trail leading to the pond. He nodded. Are you sure it won't be in the way? If it is, I can get Bill or Josh to move it. He glanced at her sharply and then shook his head. Hopping into the cab he turned the truck around, expertly backing the trailer into the spot she had indicated. One thing was for sure, if anything needed moving, he was the one she was going to get to do it. She turned her attention to Ed. She ran a hand along his sleek neck and patted the muscular shoulder. He was in excellent condition. Of course, she would have expected nothing less of any animal. Alex owned. "You, re going to like it here, boy," she said, giving him another pat. Something tugged on her belt loop and Alex swung her around, jerking her into his embrace. "Me too," he said, and pulled her close, kissing her in a way that made her legs weak. She stepped back, trying to take the electricity out of the air with a little humor. "Sure, you say that now, but come Monday morning you'll be 600 miles away." He gazed down at her soberly. "So, come back with me." She laughed nervously. "What about Ed and the farm?" He reached out and touched her temple lightly. "Katie and Bill can watch the farm. And we can take Ed back with us. We can ride him along the beaches together all day." His fingers slid down her cheek in an exciting caress as his gaze searched her face. "Hungrily. And make love all night." She swallowed down a surge of excitement. He was actually serious. But she couldn't leave the farm. It was her responsibility. "It sounds nice, but I want time to make plans for my wedding." He caught his breath and stepped back, lowering his hand. He snatched the reins from her hand and turned to Ed. "Yeah. Well, I guess we can cross that bridge when we come to it," he answered curtly. She stared at his back as he led Ed to the truck. What had she said wrong? Did he think she expected him to pay for her wedding? Did the prospect of marriage dig up old bones? She watched as he meticulously saddled Ed and tightened the cinch. Then he mounted and rode past her. "I am going to take him for a ride to loosen up. I'll be back in a little while." He nudged the horse in the ribs and Ed broke into a lope. They stopped at the gate. And Alex leaned down, opening the gate. He rode through and closed it, never looking her way. Carmen turned toward the house, dashing a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. He still wasn't over his last love. Katie was on the couch sewing when Carmen entered the living room. Katie glanced up, the needle pausing in mid-air. "Wasn't that Alex?" She nodded. "Yes, he took his horse for a ride." She kept her head down, pretending she had a sliver in her finger. At the moment she was glad she hadn't told Katie about their newfound relationship, because now it was lost. Was love always such a roller coaster of emotions? Sure, she and Josh had their share of ups and downs, but never like this. With Alex, the relationship seemed to be either grinding up a long hill or plunging perilously toward the depths of despair. There was so little time at the top. Carmen went to her room and stayed there until the banging of pots and pans announced that Katie was cooking supper. She helped Katie until Alex returned and then declined to eat, using the excuse that she didn't feel well. It was the truth. In fact, she couldn't remember a time when she had felt worse. Physical ills were miserable. But this depression was unbearable. She curled up on her bed and cried herself to sleep. Dawn brought cool air and dense fog. It was a good match for her mood. The dairy door groaned as she opened it and Ed whinnied from his stall in the barn. She smiled in spite of everything. It was going to be nice to hear him every morning. She opened the barn door and flipped on the light. Ed peered over the stall at her and nickered softly. "Hold your horses," she said, snickering over the pun. She hurried to his stall and hugged his neck. He nibbled at her jacket and nickered again. She rubbed her cheek against the soft hair on his neck. "You, such a sweetie," she said, patting his neck. "We, going to have to take a ride pretty soon. I thought maybe yesterday. But I guess he had a lot on his mind." She Rubbed his jaw. I guess he thinks I am going to ransack his wallet or something. She moved back and patted him on the neck again. I'll get you some hay. She cut the strings and pulled a few leaves from a new bale of alfalfa hay. As she lifted the hay and turned, a figure moved in the hay on the floor. She screamed and leaped back before she realized it was Alex. What in the world are you doing in here? He lay with his arms behind his head and his eyes held a twinkle of humor that never reached his mouth. I couldn't sleep. I've been out here since about 3 this morning. I was just getting off to sleep when you turned the light on. The twinkle left his eyes. Funny, the things you can say to an animal, isn't it? Warmth surged up her neck. You were eavesdropping. No, I wasn't, I was listening. He pushed up from the floor and brushed hay from his clothes. Which was more than I was doing yesterday, it seems. She handed Ed a clump of hay and he delicately plucked it from her fingers. You were listening, she said. You just didn't like what you were hearing. He made a face. That's true. I wasn't here 5 minutes before you mentioned Josh. The next thing I knew you were talking about marriage. She stared at him. I was talking marriage? You were the one who started talking about riding the beaches and making L. A cold feeling gripped her throat and strangled the words from her lungs. He wasn't proposing marriage, he was proposing an affair. Her face flamed. He smiled sourly. Love, Carmen. Making love. Are the words so difficult to say, or does your rule book say it as something perverted? She faced him coolly, trying to control her temper. No, Alex. There's nothing wrong with a man and woman making love, as long as it is sanctioned by marriage. He rubbed the back of his neck and his gaze became somber. Carmen, if and when I decide to get married, I'll do the asking, without being prompted, coaxed, coerced, or blackmailed. Anger and humiliation boiled up inside her and spilled over in a froth of rage. Of all the you egotistical, male chauvinistic pig. Why is it that men think a woman is perverted when she sacrifice her morals for him, but she's a slut when she gives in for the other guy? Men can use every ploy in the book to get a woman to submit, but if she mistakes that proposition for a proposal of marriage, right away she's blackmailing him. He stared at her, his neck growing red. All right, men are hormone-driven fools. I was out of line. I apologize. You, so innocent. I guess men have always got to push women as far as they go. Josh didn't, she shot at him. His eyes flashed darkly. Go ahead, Carmen. Beat me over the head with Josh. But tell me, if he's so much better than me, why aren't you asking him to marry you? She glared at him. I didn't have to ask him. He was man enough to ask me. They stared at each other, shocked by the things they were saying. This was no good. If they kept on lashing at each other like this, their relationship would be torn to shreds. If they cared enough to fight like this, they had to care enough to make up. She gazed up into his angry red face, knowing she had gone one step too far. Her lip quivered and a sob threatened to choke off her voice. Alex moved around her. If you want him that bad, Don, let me stand in your way. Alex, she croaked, and grabbed his arm. He paused, glancing down at her. His eyes were haunted. She had put that pain there. Only she could take it away. I don't want Josh. I want you. I love you. He watched her suspiciously. Why? She fought for control. If she cried, if she pleaded, he would pity her. That was one emotion she did want him to feel for her, anger, even rage, but not pity. She swallowed down a sob and wiped her eyes free of tears. Renewed with courage born of desperation, she met his gaze steadily. We both said some things we shouldn't have said. And I did mean you. Wherein, a man. I was angry and hurt. Maybe Josh never pushed me about sex. Because we read too much like sister and brother. His gaze softened and he watched her reflectively. Finally he reached out and took her hand. I won, push you if you won, push me. I am simply not ready to face that kind of commitment yet. Maybe I've been a bachelor too long. All I know is, I have doubts. And marriage is going to be hard enough with no doubts. When I get married it will be because I am ready to put the effort into a permanent relationship. Neither of us knows each other that well yet. I thought, maybe if you came down and stayed with me a while. She touched his lips with her fingertips. I know. I did, realize you were feeling pushed, you always seem so sure of yourself. I won, say anything more about it. Alex might have his doubts, but she did, Alex was the one. She was surer of that now than she had ever been. And he had said when I get married, not if. So he was serious all right. Was it too much to allow him time to think about it? After all, shouldn't she be doing some thinking as well? Could she entrust him with her heart? He gazed down into her eyes and his voice was choked with emotion. I love you, Carmen. I am afraid if I don't do something soon, Josh is going to get you back. He can give you things I can, She smiled up at him. Josh can, give me anything more than you can. As a matter of fact, he can, give me the thing I want most. Love, the storybook kind. He took her in his arms then, and his lips were warm on hers. She slipped her arms around his neck and drew his mouth down harder on her own. They clung to each other, molding their bodies as one until the raging fire of passion consumed her. This time it was Alex who broke off the love-making. Carmen, he whispered huskily with a nervous laugh. We better stop, or I am going to get into trouble again. She stepped away from him and raised a shaking hand to her bruised lips. I am sorry. He leaned a shoulder against the wall. If you want me to behave myself, we're going to have to stop this. Frankly, I don't think either of us can stand up to this kind of pressure. Warmth crawled up her neck with the realization that she had lost control, and Alex had been aware of it. He could have taken advantage of the moment. After all, it wasn't violating any of his principles. And yet, in her moment of surrender, he had set his desires aside and assumed responsibility. Yes, she had crossed that last hurdle of doubt. Alex had proven he could be trusted with her heart. He was man enough to wear the pants. Chapter 11. So absorbed was Katie in her wedding, that she didn't notice Alex was always at Carmen's elbow. Nor did she find anything particularly unusual about the fact that Alex stayed all day Sunday and took a plane back to Houston, leaving his truck for Carmen to drive. He insisted that he would rather lease a car for a month than have to drive back, and he didn't like the idea of leaving her with only her old truck to drive. He must have had a premonition, because the truck broke down on her way home. The following week, she walked 2 miles to Josh's place. His truck was in the drive. But no one answered the door, so she walked down to the barn. Josh wasn't alone, though. She was surprised to see him with Lori, rolling in the hay, and there was no question about what was going on this time. She gasped and ran from the barn. At the gate, she finally paused to catch her breath, her face still burning. She shouldn't have walked in unannounced, but who would have thought Josh would be doing something like that? Lori didn't surprise her. But with Josh? But then, why not? Lori had never made a secret of her feelings for Josh. Even Josh had known. So how long had this been going on? Carmen, wait up. Carmen glanced back to see a red-faced Josh striding toward her, still tucking in his shirt. She looked away from him, her face growing even warmer. What could he say? He joined her at the gate and glanced around uncomfortably. Where's your truck? She couldn't meet his gaze. Down the road a couple of miles. It broke down and I thought you could give me a tow. He glanced down at the barn. I'll go get my chain. Forget it. The truck isn't in the middle of the road. I'll walk the rest of the way home. And have Bill help me tonight when he gets off work. She opened the gate and stepped through. Thanks anyway. She couldn't believe they were talking around this situation. Josh strode off toward his truck. No, I'll help you, he said over his shoulder. What about Lori? Somebody had to bring up the subject. She was just leaving. Yeah, it looked like it, Carmen responded dryly. Honestly, Josh. Why don't you just marry her? He opened his truck door and leaned the seat forward. It isn't any of your business. It wasn't, but the shock was beginning to wear off now and she was beginning to feel conspicuous. No, it wasn't, any of you, business when you thought you caught Alex and me, but it didn't, stop you from making your nasty accusations. No wonder you thought we were. That's enough, Carmen. I am not going to even try to defend what you just saw, but I never cheated on you. This thing with Lori and me only started the other night. You made your feelings for Alex clear at the wedding, hanging all over each other and making eyes at each other across the room. You made a fool out of me in front of everyone. She caught her breath and stared at him. I am sorry, Josh. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think you wanted anything to do with me anymore. She hesitated, a dark thought invading her apology. Surely you weren't using Lori to get even. She's had a crush on you forever. He jerked the chain out of his truck and stared down at her sourly. Don't be vain. I wouldn't hurt Lori just to get back at you. He threw the chain in the truck bed. And when you get around to wondering, Lori had enough respect for you. And I that she wouldn't horn in on our relationship, either. In fact, you were the only one who violated a trust. I never cheated on you, she gasped. How could he say such a thing? Her eyes burned with threatening tears. I told you we were through long time ago. In the kitchen. When you and Alex. Yeah, Alex, he shot back. Alex this, Alex that. Your little Texas stud had better stay out of my life or I'll make him wish he never set foot in this state. First you and now Lori. What's the matter with him? Can you keep him satisfied? She stared at him. What was he talking about? Alex was in Houston and he had been with her all the time he was up this last time. He couldn't have been involved with Lori. Josh was jumping to conclusions again. She took a deep breath. Just because you sacrificed your virtue for a few moments of pleasure doesn't mean I have tossed aside my innocence. And just because Alex went out with Lori a few times a while back doesn't mean he's unfaithful to me. Maybe if you try a trusting someone a little, you wouldn't have to blame another man for the fact that you can hold a woman. His eyes flashed and he grabbed the front of her shirt, lifting her off the ground. Listen, little Miss High and Mighty. You're not doing so well at holding your man. Either. Did you know he's already called Lori several times this week? She gagged and clawed at his hands, struggling to take a breath. As little lights began to flash in her eyes, she managed to kick his shin. He let go of her shirt and she hit the ground like a sack of grain. She scrambled away from him, rubbing her neck as she gasped for air. What are you trying to do? She croaked. He stared down at her, obviously shocked by his own violence. I didn't mean to hurt you. He reached down to help her up, but she ignored his hand. She staggered to her feet and tried a voice still scratchy. I don't know where all this anger is coming from. But you might as well get it in your head that you and I are history. I have every intention of marrying Alex, and I am ready and willing to face a little competition. We're not even engaged yet, so if he wants to talk to Lori, I'll have to live with it. If you so concerned about Lori, I suggest you put a brand on her. He stared down at her for a moment and then started to laugh. Hop in the truck. Let's go get your rattle trap home. She glanced back at the barn. What about Lori? He dug the keys out of his pocket. Her car is parked around back. She had the crazy idea you'd be hurt if you saw it. She shook her head and strode around to the passenger side of the truck. As she climbed in the truck, she glanced over at him and smiled wryly. Next time you see her, tell her I am sorry I got in her way so long. He slammed his door and started the truck. Then he swung the truck around and honked, calling to Lori as she peeked out of the barn. I'll be back in a minute. Carmen's truck broke down and I am going to tow it home for her. She waved. Apparently they weren't on such bad terms after all. Finally something was working out for Josh. 2 weeks after the wedding, Carmen was browsing through some wedding pictures with Katie. Katie studied one of the pictures thoughtfully, and then flipped back to another. She pointed at a picture where Alex and Carmen were half hidden behind another couple. Are you and Alex holding hands, here? She flipped back to the other page. And he has your elbow in his hand, here. Carmen glanced at the picture and shrugged. Looks like it. Katie stared up at Carmen, her expression revealing surprise, and something else. You two are having an affair. Carmen flipped the page. A relationship. Katie stared at her reflectively. But I didn't think. She seemed to be at loss for words. Carmen laughed. Oh, come on Katie. You set us up. Now you, surprised we fell in love. Katie shook her head and gazed at Carmen soberly. I didn't set you two up. The last time I noticed, you were fighting with each other. I never would have thought. I mean, you two, of all people. I know you, looking for a husband and... Carmen waved a hand. I know, and Alex is terrified of making a commitment. We VE talked about it? I am willing to wait. ISN, it's strange how our dreams can change overnight. Why was Katie so shaken? Alex would come around eventually. It was simply going to take time. They loved each other. That was the important thing. Nothing more was said about the matter until a week later when Katie and Bill moved into their new home. Carmen helped them move the last of their things into the house, and as she was leaving, Katie took her aside. Carmen. Don, let Alex move in with you just because you, lonely. I know you think you, in love with him, but he can, make you happy. Talk to him about the things you want the most. You, LLC. He, be angry with me if I told you things. Just talk to him, okay? Carmen stared at her. What could be so terrible about Alex that his own sister would fear to discuss with her best friend? Carmen shook her head. I am not letting him move in with me, lonely or not. Not until we remarried, anyway. Katie sighed. Talk to him. I will, Carmen finally promised, but why you tell me? Did he have AIDS? The thought sent a chill up her spine. Surely Katie would have told her if he did. Was that why she seemed so concerned that they might be having an affair? Was that why Alex was suddenly interested in making up with Katie? I can, he's my brother and it would embarrass him. But I feel obliged to warn you. Anyway. Just Don, get more involved than you already are. I know how you feel about a family and all, and I Don, think. Well, just tell him how much you want children. Then he'll have to tell you. Nothing Carmen said could coax Katie to say more. For the next few days, Carmen mulled the idea over in her mind. The only thing she could think of was some kind of disease. Yet Alex seemed so healthy. What dark secret had he been holding from her that he would be forced to reveal if he knew how she felt about children? Was it because he did want children? No, that couldn't be it. A lot of men started out not wanting children, but when they saw their own children it was another story. He would be embarrassed. The only other thing she could think of was that he was a pedophile. She caught her breath. Was there another reason why Katie ran away from home? She shook the ugly thoughts from her head and straightened, leaning on the hoe as she glanced around the garden. Standing out here imagining the worst wasn't doing any more good than pumping Katie. She almost wished Katie had never said anything. Almost, but Katie wouldn't have said anything unless she considered it to be extremely important. She glanced around the lush hills. Think of something else, anything else. The house on the hill caught her eye, immediately transporting her thoughts to another sector of her mind. Someone was building a log house so close that they could overlook her farm. For the owner it was probably the perfect place for a house, providing a spectacular view. Until now she had been completely secluded. Now she felt like she was in an arena. She hacked at a piece of grass with the hoe. Maybe it was time to sell the farm. It didn't look like she was ever going to fulfill her dream of raising a family on it anyway. The telephone rang and she dropped the hoe, racing for the house. It was probably Katie. She was supposed to call today about her doctor visit. Carmen made it to the telephone on the sixth ring, gasping for breath as she picked up the receiver. Hello. Hey, sweetheart. Alex. A pause. Someone else greets you that way. No, she fought for control of her breath, but the increased pumping of her heart didn't Help. His voice gained an edge. Is something wrong? Another brief pause. Has Josh been by? No. Yes. I mean, he pulled my truck home the other day, but I thought you were driving my truck. Well, I am now. I blew a head gasket on mine. Josh said the engine is shot. Why don't you get rid of that pile of junk? I can afford to. Anyway, it has sentimental value. It belonged to Dad. Was it the first vehicle he owned? The voice was sarcastic. She laughed. Well, he did buy it new. He was so proud of it. I understand. Say no more. Just drive mine for a while. I graduate next weekend. I am going to take a week off and come see you, if you don't mind. Then I have to come back here and I'll be out of the country for about 3 weeks on a sales trip, the last one. Next week. They could settle things then. She sighed. I don't mind, but don't worry. I'll stay with Katie or get a room. I just wanted to clear it with you first. Another pause. I miss you, Carmen. I miss you, too. It's been so long. You should see Penny and Snowflake. Snowflake must be the little white doe you decided to keep. I guess that would make Penny Tessa's kid. She sighed again. Yes, but I don't think Penny is going to be a very good milk goat. She just doesn't have the temperament for it. She's always into something, and the other day she was on the porch. I am afraid she jumped the fence. Yeah, well, maybe she'll grow out of it. How? Ed. As sweet as ever. He gets along great with the goats. He's with them most of the time. I take him for a ride up the road every day, though. We're best friends now. Great. He can tell me all your secrets. If Ed could actually talk, she wouldn't be spending so much time pondering about Alex. It occurred to her to prompt Alex on the phone, but how would she broach the subject? Besides, it would be best to see his face when they talked. A week wasn't long. Chapter 12. The week seemed more like a month, but finally Alex arrived and she picked him up at the airport. They had an entire week, so there was no need to rush into a conversation that might spoil everything. No reason except the fact that she was losing a lot of sleep. Alex was there at dawn every morning to help with the chores, and then they would take off in his truck. They went fishing one day and canoeing another. Yet the conversation never turned comfortably toward children. She was going to have to force it. When the subject came up, though, it was completely unplanned. She was in the barn one morning before Alex arrived, struggling to trim Penny's hooves. Snowflake had taken the ordeal with remarkable ease, but Penny was using every ploy in the book. Carmen had Penny in the stanchion and was straddling her, trying to trim one hoof. When the little doe simply lay down, she was hanging from the stanchion and suffocating. Carmen released her and shoved her off the stanchion. I always planned to fill this farm with kids, but they're going to be human, and I hope none of them are like you. What's the matter? Carmen swung around to find Alex watching her. She blushed. She's such a pill. I think I'll take her to the sale barn and let someone else fight with her for a while. I don't need the hassle. He rubbed his jaw and eyed her reflectively. You always planned to fill the farm with kids. Every muscle in her body tensed. Children, she clarified. His hand slipped around to the back of his neck. Yours. She laughed nervously. I wouldn't want to raise anybody else's children, would you? The metal clippers felt unusually cold in her clammy grip. He picked Penny up and set her on the stanchion. I am afraid I don't have a choice. He reached a hand out for the clippers. Give me those. Why? She surrendered the clippers. Because I am going to show you how to do this. He dumped Penny on her side and pinned her down with one knee. No, I mean, why do you feel you have no choice? He clipped the nails back to expose pink quicks. Was he using the work to avoid answering her question? Finally he released the dough. See, that wasn't so hard. It didn't teach her anything, either. I can do that each time when she's a mature milk goat. They were drifting away from the subject. But you didn't answer my question. What did you mean when you said you had no choice? He leaned against the stanchion and cleared his throat. I can have children. She stared at him. Was he under court order? She took a deep breath and plunged on. Why not? He shrugged nonchalantly. Mumps when I was 12. She let out the breath in a gush of air. He was trying to delicately say that he was sterile. A whole lot better than she had imagined. Yet still a blow, maybe even worse than she had thought. There was nothing ugly between them. No reason why they couldn't get married, except one. Children were as much a part of her dreams as a husband was. She could follow her heart and marry the man she loved, but she would never be completely satisfied. Maybe she would even begin to resent him for it. He was watching her intently and his face was pale under the tan. I am sorry. It isn't one of those things that you tell someone until you already become involved. She tucked her hands in her back pockets and stared at the floor. Of all the things Katie discussed with Alex, why hadn't this subject ever come up? But then, Katie didn't expect them to hit it off, either. Who would have? The city slicker and the country hick. Even Josh had warned her. But no one had warned her about the truth. My God, Carmen. It isn't that bad. We can adopt children. It isn't like I don't want children. She gnawed on her lower lip. It wouldn't be the same. I don't know if a man can understand this, but I want to hold a baby in my arms and know it's a part of me and the man I love. I want an infant. You can adopt infants. It happens. I can get a newborn baby for you, Carmen, if it means that much to you. She shook her head. No. You don't understand. I don't want to raise an only child. I want 4 or 5 children, maybe more. Do you have any idea what it would be like to adopt that many children? What if the mother changed her mind? She has a right to. You know. I couldn't stand to love a child and lose it. His gaze was intense. Then we could use AI. It doesn't matter to me if the baby isn't biologically mine. She shook her head again. I couldn't do that. It's playing God. His hands balled into fists and the knuckles turned as white as the line around his lips. The dark eyes stood out like pockets of hot chocolate in his pale face. So what are you saying? Hit the road. No, she gasped. I don't know what to say. I love you, but I can make you happy, he ground out. He turned away from her and swore bitterly, driving his fist into the milk bucket. It shot off the counter, hitting the block wall and bouncing off to roll across the floor and stop at Carmen's feet. She jumped back and stared the dent in its side. It was completely destroyed. She glanced at his hand, but if it was hurting, he didn't seem to notice. He ran fingers through his hair and stared at her through tortured eyes. She wanted to tell him that it didn't matter, but it did. No wonder Katie had been so concerned. Katie knew a happy marriage with Alex was impossible. She wanted to strike out at someone, anyone, but there was no one to blame for the situation. There were some things that people simply took for granted. In a country filled with people aborting unwanted babies, how did this happen? How could God do this to them when all they wanted was to love each other and nurture their own children? Why were things always working out for other people? Katie was expecting a child now, Katie, who had trouble taking care of herself. All right, Alex said in a voice near a whisper. I want you to be happy. That's more important to me than anything else. If you have to marry Josh to get that happiness, then I wish you both the best of luck. He marched across the floor to the door and opened it. And lots of babies. His voice broke and he stepped through the door, slamming it. She stared after him. He was saying goodbye. She started for the door to stop him, but halfway to her destination she paused. She could bring him back, but for what? More torture? If she truly loved him, she would let him go. Let him find someone who wasn't interested in having children, someone like Lori. The idea was like a blow from a club. Her knees buckled and she slumped to the floor, racked by ragged sobs. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. If only she could wake up. More than an hour later she was pouring herself a cup of coffee and wondering if a person could get dehydrated from crying. Whenever she seemed to be getting herself under control, a fresh bout of sobs would begin. There had to be something they could do to salvage their relationship. How could she go on without him? When did the house get so empty, so lonely? By evening she was exhausted. After chores, she went to bed and cried herself to sleep. That was no escape, either. Alex was there, looking at her in that tortured way. Again. She woke and prayed fervently for an answer, and then fell asleep again, to the same nightmare. She woke abruptly, not knowing what had disturbed her sleep. She waited breathlessly, straining to hear the least noise. The night was unnaturally silent. The clock ticked 30 long seconds away and then the silence was ripped by a ferocious growl. Brutus. She leaped from the bed and struggled into her jeans, tucking her nightgown in while she grabbed her boots. All pandemonium broke loose outside. One of the goats was voicing a terrified cry and with it mingled vicious snarls and anxious barking. Obviously, something was attacking the goats. She raced down the hall tugging her boots on, hopping first on one foot and then on the other. At the door, she paused only long enough to flip on the yard and barn lights. Bursting through the door, she immediately spotted Brutus, who was waging a battle against a pack of wild dogs. She raced for the barn, for the first time wishing she had invested in that rifle Josh wanted her to buy. There must be something she could use in the barn, a pitchfork, anything. Once inside the barn, she grabbed the pitchfork and a flashlight and then darted out the barn door, screaming at the top of her lungs. The dogs scattered, leaving Brutus wounded on the ground. Outside the circle of light lay a small form, and a sweep of the flashlight revealed fur with copper highlights. A lump formed in her throat as she Recognized Penny. Brandishing the pitchfork with renewed courage, she boldly strode to Brutus. One ear was torn half off and his fur was bloody around the collar. A gash in one leg prevented him from rising. He whined as she knelt beside him. Lay still, Brutus, she managed through a constricted throat. I'll check on Penny. Turning on the flashlight, she moved toward the goat. It was dead, its throat torn viciously. A dark form moved at the edge of the tree line, and when she shined the flashlight in that direction, the light reflected off more than one pair of eyes. Were they waiting to devour Penny, or were they waiting to finish off Brutus? She slowly retreated and knelt beside Brutus again. Come on, boy. She tugged at his collar and he tried in vain to rise. You've got to get up, boy. They'll kill you if you stay out here. He was too heavy to carry and the barn was at least 100 feet away. She tugged at his collar again, but it was useless. If she ran to the house to call for help, the dogs would attack Brutus again. Somehow she had to take him with her. And soon. The forms were getting braver. Darting out from the trees and then retreating when she flashed the light in that direction. The wheelbarrow was in the barn, but even if she managed to get there and back, she couldn't lift Brutus into it. It would be hard enough to get him on his rug once she had him in the barn. That gave her an idea. She backed away slowly, flashing the light on the forms. She ducked into the barn, grabbing a feed sack she remembered throwing beside the barn door. As she emerged from the barn, one of the forms was nearing the circle of light. She grabbed the pitchfork and poked it in his direction, screaming as she did so. The wild dog ran a few steps toward the trees and then stopped, his head low as he watched her. Better hurry, they were getting braver. She raced over to Brutus and positioned the sack behind him. Ignoring his whines and growls, she grabbed his feet and rolled him over so that he was lying on the sack. It was going to take 2 hands to pull him, 2 hands and all her strength. She turned and threw the pitchfork toward the barn. Placing the flashlight on Brutus, she grabbed the sack with both hands and tugged. The sack and dog moved about 2 feet. Again. She tugged and accomplished about the same. The wild dogs were gathering around the circle of light now, and 2 of them boldly began to devour Penny. She hated to leave the little doe for them, but maybe their interest in the goat would keep them occupied long enough to get Brutus into the barn. 3 of the dogs ignored the feast, intent on her progress toward the barn. Where was the pitchfork? She glanced around. Maybe 5 feet away. She turned back to find one of the dogs advancing. Grabbing the flashlight, she shined it into his eyes, screaming again. He backed up a few feet and stopped, lowering his head and growling in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She lunged frantically again, dragging Brutus nearly 4 feet this time. Thank God for adrenaline. The smart thing to do would be to abandon Brutus for the safety of the barn. If the dogs got any closer, she would have to tug, scream, shine the flashlight, throw the pitchfork toward the barn. Tug. The closer she got to the barn, the braver the wild dogs got. The telephone buzzer rang. Who would be calling at this hour? Was it possible that Josh had heard the noise and was checking? Oh, please, God. Send me some help. Don, let Brutus die. The dogs were distracted momentarily by the sound of the telephone, but when it stopped ringing, they advanced further. She jerked on the sack again. She was getting tired and her efforts were less productive. 2 more tugs and then she saw lights. Coming down the drive. Thank you, God. She tugged again and one of the dogs moved closer, baring his teeth. She screamed at him and flashed the light in his eyes, but he wasn't impressed. She stumbled back and grabbed the pitchfork, jabbing it at him. He fell back a few feet and snarled at her. A vehicle door slammed and Josh was yelling for her to get back. Kill Brutus, she screamed, refusing to take her eyes off the wild dog. Get out of the way and I'll shoot him. She instantly leaped to the side and rolled away from the animal, glancing up as the rifle belched flames. The wild dog cried out sharply once and dropped. The other wild dogs vanished. You fool! Josh yelled at her as he approached Brutus. He's only a dog. He can be replaced, you can, They wouldn't, have attacked me. They only wanted Brutus and the goats. It was something that had been at the back of her mind all the time, but it wasn't true. She had stood between the pack of wild dogs and what they wanted. Josh grabbed the sack and pulled Brutus along. It looked like they weren't going to attack you, didn't it? Together they managed to get Brutus safely into the barn. He was in need of a veterinarian if he was going to live, and the closest one was nearly 20 miles away. Unless. Did Alex spend the night with Katie? She started for the door. I am going to call and see if Alex is at Katie's. Josh stared at her. First you, better call a veterinarian. She paused with one hand on the door. Alex is a veterinarian, and Katie lives less than 5 miles away. If he's not there, I'll call someone else. Without waiting for a response, she raced to the house and dialed Katie's number with shaking hands. The ordeal over, she was going to pieces. The phone rang 4 times before a sleepy male voice answered. Hello, Bill. Is Alex there? A pause. This is Alex. Carmen. The voice had lost its sleepy sound. He was wide awake now. Yes, do you have your medical equipment with you? Some. What's wrong? Is one of the goats sick? Hearing his voice did something to hers. She struggled through a hiccup. Wild dogs. They attacked the herd. Brutus is torn up real bad. Could you come over here? Wild dogs. Are you sure? Are you all right? Stay in the house and I'll be right over. Don, go out there. It's all right. Josh is here. He shot one of them and they ran off. Too late, she realized what he would think. He heard the noise and came down, she added quickly. He gave her a list of supplies to round up and said he would be there in a few minutes. By the time she found everything, he was driving into the yard. Josh glanced around from his sentry duty at the barn door when they came in. Alex went straight to Brutus and examined him. Can you give me a hand? He's going to need a lot of stitches, but other than that, I think he's all right. They worked over Brutus for the better part of an hour and finally Alex leaned back and stretched. That should do it. You'll need to keep an eye on him and make sure he has plenty of water. Don, let him get up for a while. He put his things away and glanced up at Carmen. Do you want me to stay here tonight to watch him? She gazed into his eyes, wanting desperately to tell him to stay. Yet there was more at stake here than Brutus. Saying yes would be setting him up for further hurt. It would be encouraging him, indicating there was still a chance. Saying no would be telling him to get out and never come back. She should tell him no, but she couldn't voice the word. If he was the wrong man, why did it feel so right? Josh strolled across the room and glanced down at her, misreading her expression. As usual. I'll stay. You can go on and get some rest. His words were like a sharp object puncturing a water balloon, and her words gushed out in a wave of uninhibited emotion. No, I want Alex to stay. Alex raised his brows in obvious surprise. Josh was behind Alex, and he grinned at Carmen. Well, I know I'll feel better knowing he's here. His words were spoken with sarcasm, but not for the reason Alex probably thought. Josh wasn't concerned about Alex making a pass at Carmen. He must have Lori at his place. Josh left, not knowing what had come between them. Right now she wished she had someone to talk to, but she couldn't share this with anyone but Alex and God, and God wasn't listening. They cleaned up the mess and then stood in awkward silence, watching Brutus. Finally Alex spoke. I changed my flights and I am leaving tomorrow. I am going to leave my truck here so you'll have something to drive. That isn't necessary. I can. It is necessary and I don't want an argument. I am going to be out of the country for a while, so I won't need it. When I get back, we'll discuss this thing again. I think we both need more time to consider what we want to do. It isn't like we don't love each other. He gazed down at her inquiringly. Is it? She met his gaze and felt drawn by the warmth. Unable to trust her voice, she merely shook her head. A slight smile touched the corners of his mouth. Then you agree to give it some more thought. She nodded and cleared the lump from her throat. I've been praying and praying. But I don't get an answer. I don't know what to do. He tucked his thumbs in his hip pockets and turned away from her. When Tessa left me I prayed every night that she would come back. I was angry about what she had done, but I couldn't let loose of her. Then I was angry with God for ignoring my prayers. He scraped the toe of his boot across the floor. It took me a couple of years to realize God had answered my prayer the first time. He said no. He lifted his gaze to her intent face. I couldn't see the future, so I thought there wasn't one. I don't want to waste any more time second-guessing God. He brought me to you for some reason. He made me love you for some reason. I can believe it was to make you unhappy. His words were like a ray of sunshine through the window on a cold winter morning. At first they only brightened her heart, but as they continued, they gradually chased the chill away. Was God sending her a message? Was she being greedy, insisting on having everything? Without Alex, she might never be truly happy. Without children she might never be truly happy. Must she choose? This very moment she would choose Alex, but what about 20 years from now, when it was too late to have children? Would she be sorry? Feel trapped? What if their marriage wasn't successful and she lost both? He held out his hand to her, and when she accepted it, he pulled her close in a comforting embrace. I am not asking you to make a decision now. I am asking you not to make a hasty decision. Think about it. Okay. She nodded. Okay. It felt so safe and warm in his arms. He wasn't demanding or pleading, he was reasoning with her, believing in her ability to make a sound judgment and willing to accept her decision. With every day she knew him, he became more of a man. More of a friend she could trust. Chapter 13. The days grew warmer, and work on the house on the hill drew to a standstill. The new owner must have run out of money. The dry weather was perfect for building. She hacked at the dry earth with her hoe. It was terrible weather for growing things. Even so, she had managed to can 30 pints of green beans and 20 pints of tomatoes so far. Not bad. She dropped the hoe and mopped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She glanced around the farm. The goats were staying close to the house today. Were the dogs out there someplace again? Josh, Bill, and Alex had gone hunting for them the day after the attack, but they lost the trail in some rocks on her back 40 acres. It was rugged country back there, full of wild plums, too. This year she had been afraid to harvest them because of the dogs. Josh was certain it was a pack, not simply a gathering of neighbor dogs. She was inclined to agree. That put everyone at risk, but her goats were the easiest targets. A gray truck stopped at the gate and she waved at Josh. Now what? She walked up to the road while he waited in the truck. She lifted a hand to shield her eyes from the evening sun while she talked to him. What's going on? I haven't seen you in a while. He nodded, obviously perturbed about something. I've been busy. He tapped the roof of his truck with his fingernails. Your stud is back, and the first place he went was to see Lori. They did know I was around and I saw them. Him hugging her like they were old friends. She smiled up at him. Oh, Josh. You're such a worrier. Alex is affectionate, he probably hugs all the girls. It doesn't mean anything. He shook his head in disgust. What does it take to open your eyes about him? He's been globe-trotting for the last 3 weeks. Dawn, you wonder what he's been doing. She shrugged. He's been on a business trip. I trust him. What good would it do to get suspicious, anyway? It wouldn't change anything if he wanted to cheat. If you make an honest woman out of Lori, you wouldn't have to worry about all this. His face turned red. You beginning to sound like Lori. So what are you waiting for? He snorted. I am waiting for her to stop making eyes at your stud. She gave him a level look. His name is Alex, and I don't want to hear you call him stud again. Alex isn't the problem between you and Lori, and he wasn't the problem between you and me. You turned me away with your suspicious actions, long before Alex came along. Keep it up and you lose Lori as well. She turned and left him at the gate. She was sick of hearing him talk about Alex as though he was a testosterone-driven wild man. None of which explained why Alex had stopped to see Lori first. She pushed it from her mind. The only thing jealousy did was make people miserable. Josh was living proof. The fact that Alex stopped to see Lori merely gave Carmen time to get cleaned up. Behind her, Josh roared his engine as he turned the truck around, and slung gravel on the road as he took off. He'd get glad the same way he got mad. Maybe he'd even think about what she said. 3 goats were on the porch. She glanced around to see if a gate was open. Nothing. There must be a bad spot in the fence. It couldn't be too far away from the house. They hadn't wandered that far today. She shooed the goat back into the pasture and grabbed a pair of linesman pliers and some baling wire from the barn. Ed lifted his head and nickered, but he continued to work on the salt block when she didn't call him. By the time she could saddle him, she could be in the hills. Somewhere in the distance a horn honked. Even 80 acres couldn't hold back the population growth in this area. She wandered along the fence line examining every post for possible weakness. No brush grew within 3 feet of the fence. Wasn't it like a goat? 20 acres and they were always at the fence line, poking their heads through to eat the brush on the other side. Ed whinnied down by the barn, and then nickered in a higher tone. It was getting close to feeding time. Some of the more friendly goats had followed her up the hill and they were ranging out ahead. Hopefully they would find the spot and get out again before she could fix it. And then she saw it, a wallowed out place under the fence. Some hunter's dog had probably dug it out. Dog. At that moment one of the goats darted by her, bleating. In terror, she swung around to see what had frightened the goat and the hair lifted on the back of her neck. 4 dogs were trotting across the low bluff on the other side of the fence. The lead dog was the chow she had recognized the night the dogs attacked Brutus. Suddenly Brutus was at her side, snarling and trying to push her away. Her one thought was to plug the hole so the dogs couldn't get through. She searched around and found a large rock. Grabbing the edge of it, she tugged it toward the hole. It got hung up on a stump and she had to yank from another direction to dislodge it. She glanced up at the dogs. She wasn't going to make it. Come on, Brutus, she yelled as she headed for the barn. The proximity of the snarls behind told her she wasn't going to make it to the barn either. She visually selected a tree ahead that looked easy to climb. Brutus was on his own. That was when she saw the red dog running through the trees. Obviously he had already been inside the fence when she found the hole. Running from it was probably the worst thing she could do, but panic had set in and her legs were under control of her mind. She screamed, racing for the tree and knowing she didn't have a chance of outrunning the dog. Suddenly Brutus was at her side again, lunging to meet the red dog. It took her a moment to separate the pounding of her heart from the sound of hooves striking earth. Ed was running beside her, and then a strong arm was plucking her from the ground. Ed plunged to a stop and Alex pulled her up into the saddle with him. He jerked a rifle from its scabbard and swung it around with one arm, firing it into the air. The sound echoed off the bluffs and the dogs retreated. Brutus started after them, snarling and barking his disgust. "Are you all right?" Alex asked anxiously. Too breathless to respond, she nodded, and he lowered her to the ground. "Can you get Brutus to take the goats back to the barn?" She nodded again. "Then do it. I'll be down in a few minutes. I want to see if I can track them this time." "Be careful," she finally gasped. "Go. Brutus," she yelled. "Bring them in." Brutus stopped and eyed the dogs reluctantly. Finally he abandoned the chase and started rounding up the goats. Together they got the goats in the barn and locked the doors. It was in her mind to go back up the hill and check on Alex when she saw Josh pull up at the gate. She ran up the drive toward him. "Josh, hurry. The dogs are back." Alex went after them on Ed. Josh pulled his truck through the gate and leaped out, grabbing his shotgun from the rack behind the seat. "Did he have a gun?" She nodded, and then stiffened as Ed came out of the hills, riderless. "Alex!" she screamed, and raced toward the field. "Carmen!" Josh grabbed her arm. "Stay here. I'll go after him." "Hurry." Josh vaulted the fence and raced up the hill, only to stop in surprise as Alex emerged from the trees riding a horse colored enough like Ed to be his twin. He shook his head and turned back to Carmen, leaping the fence again in a single bound. Together they watched as Alex put the horse down the hill, his body moving gracefully with the motion of the horse. I'll give him one thing. Your little St. Texan is quite a horseman. Carmen glanced up at him and smiled. He's quite a man, and he just saved my life. She shrugged. For what it's worth. He put an arm around her shoulder, gazed down at her thoughtfully. It's worth a lot. To me, little sister. She smiled and hugged his waist. I can tell you how wonderful those words sound. He squeezed her shoulder. I took your advice, and I got myself engaged. Now, I've got me a score to settle. He strode up to Alex as he joined them. Listen, you little St. He shot a quick look at Carmen. Stay away from my girl. Alex raised his brows. Your girl? Have you got a number stamped on every girl in the county? Why don't you make up your mind and stick to just one? Then it was true. Alex was interested in Lori. Why not? They were the perfect couple, and Lori didn't want children. Well, at least she had been spared the embarrassment of telling him she still hadn't figured out what God was trying to tell her. Poor Alex, out of the frying pan and into the fire. I've got my mind made up, Josh responded testily. And you've been horning in on the action. Now, just to show you what a nice guy I can be, I am inviting you to an engagement party tonight at Fred's Hickory Inn. 6:00. You be there to show her. What a good sport you are. Alex shifted his gaze to Carmen. Is it true? She nodded. It didn't give her much pleasure to win by default. Especially when she wasn't sure she could hold him. He grimaced as he jammed the rifle down into its boot. He shook his head. My loss is your gain, Josh. I only hope you can make her happy. Don't ask for my blessing, though, because you're not going to get it. He swung the horse around and headed down the hill toward the creek. He'd be back after a while and they could talk. Maybe by then she could make up her mind, if he was still interested. Alex didn't come back. Maybe that was what finally opened her eyes. It hit her as she was dressing to go to the party. Neither Alex nor children were the key to happiness. She could go on feeling sorry for herself because she couldn't have children, or she could accept the cards that had been dealt her and settle for less than perfection. If she searched for the rest of her life, she might never find a better mate than Alex. After 20 or 30 years of marriage, they would still be alone together, whether or not they had any children. What she needed was a little of that stuff she had been pitching at Josh. Trust. That was why everything was working out for everyone else. Planning ahead was a good thing up to a point. After that it was obsession. Somewhere, somehow, everyone had to release themselves to chance. Alex had learned that. Why was it so hard for her? Probably for the same reason it had been for him so many years. Because he didn't realize what he was doing. Was it too late? Could she win back what she had thrown away? Katie was wrong. Alex could make her happy, if she would let him. Chapter 14. Under the circumstances, Carmen didn't want to drive Alex's truck, so she accepted Josh and Lori's invitation to ride with them. At 6:45 they were seated at a table with Bill and Katie. The waitress approached the table. Are you ready to order? No, Josh answered, pointing to an empty chair beside Carmen. We have one more guest. The waitress nodded and left them. Carmen frowned at Josh. He won, be here. Josh took a sip of his drink. Sure he will. He squinted at his watch in the dim light. He still has 10 minutes. He patted Lori's hand. He's full of surprises, he. Lori laughed. I still can't believe you did that. Poor Alex. Beating his brains out. Trying to get that log house built and you, suspecting him of courting me. When would he find the time? He was with Carmen almost every minute he was in the state. And then there's his latest venture. The conversation was moving a little fast. Carmen stared at Lori. What log house? Josh eyed Carmen skeptically. What house, she says. As if you don't know. Don't play innocent with us. You got to know he had that log house built. When she continued to stare at him blankly, he shook his head in disbelief. And I thought I was the last to know. You got to be joking, the house overlooking yours. The log house on the hill? Why would Alex build a house there? Of course, he liked the land around her farm, but building a house was a major investment, especially that one. Apparently his relationship with Lori was mostly business. So why had he challenged Josh? And then she knew. Because he thought she and Josh were discussing their engagement, not Lori and Josh. Would he be here tonight? He said. They weren't going to get his blessing, so it was highly unlikely. They might as well get started without him. The sooner they finished, the sooner she could find him and explain. What if he had gone back to Texas? No, he had the house, and whatever he was working on now. She glanced at Lori. What's this latest venture you mentioned? Lori smiled. The clinic. I know he mentioned that to you because he told me he did. Carmen glanced at Lori and then at Katie. Clinic? I knew he planned to build a clinic sometime, but I thought. Carmen felt her face getting hot. Did they think she was lying about the house? Obviously they thought there was something sordid to hide. A disturbance at the entrance caught their attention and Carmen turned to see Alex striding purposefully across the floor toward them. His attention was riveted on her as he altered his course to stop at the table in front of her. I can't let you go through with this, Carmen. Not when you're still in love with me. We can work this thing out. His voice faded off as he realized that Lori and Josh were sitting at the opposite end of the table from Carmen. His neck turned red. This is something you all cooked up, isn't it? Josh laughed. Alex, have a seat there beside Carmen. This engagement dinner is for Lori and me. Alex glanced around at the interested faces at the tables near them, and pulled out the chair. He sat down beside Carmen and scooted his chair in, sliding an arm across the back of Carmen's chair. He leaned close, speaking softly in her ear. Fill me in. I am making a fool of myself. All eyes were on them as Carmen turned to him. You, in good company. It seems we were all a little lost. Briefly, Josh thought. You were chasing Lori, so he told you to knock it off. When you didn't deny it, I thought it must be true. I didn't know you thought Josh and I were engaged. She paused and frowned at him. It's all your fault, you know. Why didn't you tell anybody about the house? He glanced at Lori and shrugged. I wanted it to be a surprise. I didn't know it was. Creating a problem. His gaze traveled around the faces at the table and came to rest on Carmen. I can, believe you guys. I've been openly courting Carmen from day one, but all I have to do is see Lori a couple of times and you think we romantically involved. Day one. Katie said, giving Alex a scalding look. You told me you were coming up to see the goats give birth. He shook his head. No, you assumed that, and I merely kept my mouth shut. His eyes twinkled with humor. If you been doing that for the last year, I wouldn't have thought about coming up here. The picture was the last straw. Katie stared at him. I thought you were determined to remain a bachelor. Her gaze shifted to Carmen. I hope you two have considered all the problems. Carmen shot Katie a warning look. We still have a lot to discuss. She glanced back at Alex. After dinner. The soft chocolate gaze met hers and the smooth lips tipped up slightly at the corners. My place or yours? She blushed. Yours. I want to see this house everybody else knew about. Do you give tours? His hand found hers under the table and he laced his fingers through hers. I think we could work out something. He glanced around the table again. I believe this dinner is for Josh and Lori. The attention shifted back where it belonged and stayed there for the rest of the dinner. Carmen ate with her left hand, unwilling to let loose of Alex for 1 second. When dinner was over, Alex escorted her out the door, leaving the rest of the party talking in low tones. His truck was in the parking lot, so he had been back to her house. Had he seen Josh pick her up? She smoothed the folds of her skirt nervously and waited for him to open the subject, but he was silent until they reached the log house. He led her across the wide porch and unlocked the door, flipping on the light. Carmen gasped as they stepped into the empty living room. The room was large, with a hardwood floor and a huge fireplace. A large bay window sported a roomy window seat. I didn't get any curtains or furniture yet. I thought those were things you might like to buy. She glanced up at him. Was that supposed to be a proposal? Surely Alex would come up with something better than that. Of course, a proposal of marriage was something that didn't come easy for him. It's beautiful, she responded. I like the window seat. It overlooks my farm, doesn't it? That it does. His voice was husky as he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the window seat. There he lowered her to the cushions. He kicked off his boots and sat down beside her, leaning back against the wall. Come here. He pulled her next to him, so that her back was leaning against his chest. Let's talk. Comfortable as the position was, it was hard to relax. Her heart was knocking around inside her chest like an egg in a blender. Was he finally going to propose? He kissed her neck softly. About this problem of having children. There are other options. You could still have a child. It wouldn't physically be mine, but there's more to being a father than the time it takes to plant the seed. She shook her head. I could never do something like that. If God wants us to have children, it will happen. Otherwise, I can live with it. All I want is you. He was silent a long time. Had she pushed him too far again? Was he working up the courage to ask? Why was it so difficult? Finally he cleared his throat. Let's not wait, Carmen. There's no reason to wait any longer. We love each other. That's what matters, not a formality that only creates more stress. I can wait to make you mine, completely. She stiffened. No wonder he was having so much trouble expressing himself. He wasn't proposing. He was propositioning her, again. And he must know what her answer would be. "What do you say?" he asked softly. She brought her elbow around into his ribs and the air escaped his lungs in a startled groan of protest. She jerked away from him. "Honestly, Alex. How many times do you have to be told no?" He stared at her, obviously puzzled by her refusal. "Whatever happened to, I just want you? I wish you, make up your mind." "I have. I made up my mind when I was a young girl. I am not going to go all the way until I get married." He frowned. "Well, what did you think I was talking about?" Comprehension suddenly invaded the dark eyes and he shook his head. "Let me start all over, in a way. I know you, understand." He rose from the window seat and turned to face her. Going down on one knee, he fished in his shirt pocket and came out with a diamond engagement ring. Carmen caught her breath and waited. Finally, he gazed up into her eyes. "Will you marry me, Carmen?" Her heart skipped a beat. She closed her eyes and said a prayer of thanks before she answered him. "Yes," she whispered. He stood and pulled her into his arms. "I promise you one, be sorry, Carmen. I'll make you happy. I'll love and cherish you, protect you." She hugged him. "I know you will, and I'll never betray you." He slipped the ring on her finger. "Now, I have something else for you." He tugged on his boots and led her through a large formal dining room. She peeked into a sparkling kitchen with a dishwasher and range, and an overhead oven. Then he led her out patio doors through a small courtyard, down steps and a concrete walkway to a tidy barn. There he introduced her to Princess, the horse he had been riding earlier. "I bought her for you. She'll be the first horse on your ranch." He directed her to the next stall. "She had this pretty little filly with her, and I didn't have the heart to separate them." Carmen gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "Oh my gosh, Alex." She held one hand out and the filly nickered, stretching her nose out to touch the hand cautiously. She was mostly white with freckles across her haunches and a few spots on her neck and chest. Brown eyes with long white lashes stared at Carmen with obvious curiosity. "She's beautiful," Carmen finally said. Alex chuckled. "Her name is Casper. The owner said she was friendly, but he hasn't had time to work with her. She's almost a year old. They both registered. Appaloosa, s." Carmen patted the mare on the neck. "They both beautiful. Thank you." She hugged Alex again. "I didn't notice she was a female today. I thought it was Ed. And when he came out of those trees without you." Her voice broke. "I thought the worst." He stroked Carmen's hair. "And when I came out of those trees, I thought the worst too. When I saw you and Josh together." Carmen gazed up at him. "I am sorry. He was only comforting me, though." She leaned back and met his somber gaze. "I don't understand. If you were courting me from day one, as you said at the restaurant, then why were you so reluctant to get married?" He squeezed her shoulders. "I wasn't reluctant to get married. I was concerned about marrying a woman who was obviously still interested in another man. Every time I set the scene to ask you, his name would crop up. Or he would And then when you said you did, want to adopt children, I thought I did, have a right to ask you. She touched his lips with her fingers. You were afraid I would drop you and marry Josh, because he could give me what I wanted, just like that Nashville agent could give Tessa what she wanted. She shook her head. I am not Tessa, Alex. I know. You, everything to me. She was using me to get everything she needed. He smiled tenderly. And you wouldn't, take anything from me. Does my independent nature trouble you? He laughed. No, I love it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to figure you out, though. You have a habit of trying to hide your feelings, or disguise them. And then you, such a strange combination of the past and present. You want the man to wear the pants, but you, determined to do everything yourself. She gazed up at him. Oh Alex, I can, help but wonder if someday when I am bloated and cranky, you, wish you had, given up your freedom? He chuckled softly and pulled her close. Sweetheart, if I did, feel sorry about that. At some point during our marriage, I, probably be the first man. There will be times like that for both of us. From now on we have to work at this relationship, harder than we, ever worked at anything. Determination will make it work, determination and love. His lips pressed warmly against hers briefly and then he drew back to look into her eyes. Lucky thing for us, we have plenty of both. They walked back to the house, their arms around each other's waist. He led her to the window seat again, and they sat there watching the sunset. It was so peaceful and she felt so content with his arms around her. They talked for hours about their plans together. This was the way she had always imagined it would be. He was the man she had always dreamed of, even though she had not met him yet. Still, what was the most amazing of all was that she fulfilled his dreams as well. Finally things were working out for both of them. Epilogue. Alex replaced the last desk drawer and closed the box of personal items on his desk. Gerald leaned against the office wall with one shoulder, watching him absently. I can, believe you, actually going to do this. Alex glanced up. Get married? Gerald lifted sandy brows. Quit this job and move to Arkansas to be a veterinarian. You, the best salesman we have. Alex shrugged. Being a veterinarian is my lifelong dream. Gerald grunted. Any second thoughts? Alex retrieved Carmen's picture from the desk and gazed at it, answering Gerald absently. About getting married. About leaving the firm, Gerald said. None, Alex said confidently, his attention never leaving the picture. Okay, Gerald, said in a dry tone. Do you have any second thoughts about getting married? Alex lifted his gaze from the picture and regarded Gerald reflectively. Not really. He had plenty of concern about holding up his end of the bargain. He had promised to protect her, but Carmen didn't think she needed protection. She did, and deep inside, she wanted to be protected, physically and emotionally. In some ways she was still a little girl. Gerald's smile was sardonic. Why did I get the feeling you wanted to talk about getting married? Alex gave his full attention to tucking the photo into the box through a gap in the top. I have no idea. I can, figure you, Gerald said, moving away from the wall. You, the one who taught me not to put all my eggs in one basket. You bought a clinic, built a house and now you, quitting your job to get married to a woman you, known for less than a year. Alex gave up trying to fit the picture into the gap in the box and laid it on top of it. He looked up at Gerald. I did, buy the clinic and build the house for her. Gerald's tone was sarcastic. I sure hope you did, tell her that. Alex shrugged. I like the country and the laid-back people. Besides, my sister and her husband are there, you know. There was no reason to tell Carmen that he had decided to purchase the land adjoining hers when Laurie first told him about it, even before they had discussed the clinic. Gerald eyed him with mild amusement. So, what part are you doing for the bride? Alex smiled. The marrying part. Gerald laughed. If you, too busy to take her on the honeymoon, let me know. He stuck out a hand to Alex. Well, buddy, I hope you, getting as good a deal as she is. Alex shook his hand. Thanks. I am. She's quite a woman. Gerald walked to the door and then stopped, looking back at Alex. Tell me, what's the most intriguing thing about her? Alex thought about it for a minute. There isn't any one thing. She's a beautiful, sweet, innocent girl. Gerald considered the information. Girl. He said reflectively. She needs you. Alex eyed him thoughtfully. Maybe we need each other. She needs someone to take care of her and I need someone to take care of. Gerald made a face. There are lots of women out there who meet that requirement. They've been chasing you for a long time. Why this one? Alex lifted his brows and turned his palms up to the ceiling in defeat. Beats me. Gerald turned to the door. Love, he said as he walked out of the office. If I live to be 1,000 years old, I'll never understand it. After he left, Alex picked up the picture and sat down in the plush office chair for the last time. Leaning back, he studied the picture. She was the one. He knew it the day they met, but it was impossible to say exactly why. Something about the way she smiled up at him, as though no one else existed. And the way she watched him when she thought he wasn't aware she was looking. That amethyst gaze openly displayed every emotion. Browsing her face told him everything he needed to know about her thoughts. The soft voice and the little dimple that played at the corner of her mouth. When she teased him. She was so beautiful, and so utterly unaware of her charm. He wasn't entirely honest with Gerald, though. He did have second thoughts about this marriage. Carmen wasn't the only one who wanted children so badly. He had long ago accepted the fact that he would have no biological children. In fact, he had already looked into adoption. Carmen would probably eventually warm to that alternative, but she needed time to adjust to the idea. He'd have to be patient with her. As to Carmen's idea about him being the final decision maker, he was still skeptical. For her, it was a romantic idea. All would go well until they had conflicting ideas about how something should be done. She was naive enough to think that wouldn't happen. To be honest, thinking about the responsibility of making those decisions was overwhelming at times. No one made good decisions 100% of the time. Last, but not least, was Josh. Carmen expected him to switch to being a big brother. Now, maybe that was what he planned to do, but the way he looked at her was hardly brotherly. From the expression on Laurie's face at those times, she didn't think the romance was over either, at least not for Josh. But Carmen was more than a beautiful face on an equally beautiful body. She was passionate about everything. More than likely their marriage would be strained at times, but he couldn't picture it ever being dull. In spite of her strict moral standards on Premarital relationships, Carmen was obviously stirred deeply by desire. The way the pulse throbbed in her neck when he kissed it, and the way she sounded out of breath when she pushed him away, the feel of her breasts when she molded her body to his. He stood and put the picture on top of the box. It was best not to think about those things. He could get into enough trouble without getting primed for it. He grabbed the box and walked out of the room, shutting the door without looking back. A new and exciting life lay ahead of him. Few pleasant memories lay behind him. In that office. Alex turned toward the stairs, avoiding the front office. He already said goodbye to all of them earlier. The last thing he wanted was another tear session with the girls. It was his wedding, not his funeral. He put the box behind the seat in the truck and climbed in, laying the picture beside him. The movers had taken the last of his things from the apartment this morning and he had returned the key. Home was in Arkansas now, over 500 miles away. And he planned to sleep there tonight.